Howdy, everybody. Humanities 2, Shasta College. It is the 25th, Monday. We're starting a new topic. We finished film. Hope you guys got something out of that last week. And this is our last week. We're winding down. Every day's 109. We live in lots of heat. Everything's due this week, so get it all in as fast as you can. I have very few days to make all the grades, so I've got to hustle the grading to get your final grades. If you hand in after the day, the class is over. So try to get everything in before then. Okay, and then have patience on the final grading. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Um, yeah, we're starting with television. But before we do, we lost a great film director, influential film director yesterday, Bob Rafelson. You've probably never heard of him, uh, but he was important to a certain generation. If you watch that movie that the test was based on, Easy Rider, Raging Bulls, they mention him often in there. He's the guy who helped create the TV series The Monkees. That was so successful. That was in the 66 or so. That was so successful that he branched out, had his own film company, and directed a couple revolutionary films in that golden era of uh, 70s films that the auteur directors, he's one of them, that stormed the gates of the Hollywood system and directed a couple a couple films that changed everything, personal films. Uh, they both actually starred Jack Nicholson. One was called Five Easy Pieces, which on my personal level of like movies, it's in my top five for the rest of my life. It's the existential story about a guy who was just as fast satisfied with his life. He's going from one aimless job after another, lives with a woman he doesn't love, but who loves him. He's living a very hedonistic life, sleeping with a bunch of women, getting drunk every night. And and it turns out he's from a very wealthy family who lives up in off the islands in Seattle, Bainbridge or Vashon, I can't remember which one it is. And his family are famous classical pianists, and so is he. He was at one time, and so he works these blue collar jobs like in oil fields. He lives a rough hewn life, but really comes from a very sophisticated family. But he can't relate to them. They smother him, and it ends. The movie ends ambiguously. You don't know what's going to happen. See, that's how they used to end movies. It wasn't giving you everything in a silver platter of the answers. And that movie definitely was that. There's some very, very famous scenes in there. In fact, I'm going to post one. No, we're doing television right now. I'm not going to post it. We're done with films. But I'm just saying, I wanted to give a shout out to Bob Rafelson, who was a television revolutionary also. He died at 89. So he did pretty good. The other movie he did, The King of Marvin Gardens with Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern, is a story about two brothers who are trying to have some sort of connection in life in business, like hotel business in Atlantic City, and a very dark movie about family obsession and jilted love. So, television. You have always have probably had a television in your house, maybe more than one. Were you glued to it as a child? Are you glued to it now? We're watching a lot of streaming. That's television, folks. If we're watching it on the box, they used to call it the box. Now it's a flat screen. Well, when that started in the late 40s, it was a complete, utter technical revolution. And in 1948 or so, when it actually was introduced, and there was several hundred TVs in America. That was it. They're very expensive. Nobody had them. There was no programming. There was a little. And so why would you get one of those? Well, by 1952, there was thousands of TVs and lots of programming. Compared to now, not a lot of programming. But there was three channels in those early days: CBS, ABC, NBC, and they dominated television. Each of them had news shows, documentary shows, series. And if you look at your chapter 13, you'll see the early dawn of television and how important it was to the cultural development and how devastating it was to the Hollywood film industry because TV was free. You had to watch the commercials, but it still didn't cost you anything. Just had to buy the TV, get the rabbit ears or the antenna up on the roof, and people started staying home. Hollywood didn't know what to do. I talked about this last week in film. So Hollywood tried to make their adjustments by making essentially what we would call blockbuster movies, stuff you couldn't see on your TV screen in color because all the TVs, all of them were black and white. Not just because they only broadcast black and white, there was no such thing as color TV yet. And so for the 1950s, families stayed home and they watched the TV together. It was family night, and you just gathered around, you watch I Love Lucy or The Honeymooners or Milton Berle show, and it was a family affair. They actually developed TV trays to watch TV as you eat dinner on a tray in front of you. And so people line up on a couch or a comfortable chair and eat your dinner. That's how TV became an American addiction very quickly. And these new series like The Honeymooners, I Love Lucy were in themselves a revolution and a game changer for the culture. We're seeing free television, free programming, and it was 7 days a week. Not like it is now, 24 hours a day. It would go off at midnight, come and get up, usually on again at 6 a.m. It was off all night, folks. There was no programming. You couldn't watch TV at 2 in the morning like you can now. Um, and it became a part of our who we are. We were seeing ourselves on the screen, or were we? Or was it a fantasy? His fathers knows best. Leave it to Beaver. Is that how we really are? Is that how Americans are? Or is it how Hollywood wanted Americans to be? And so, and they're mostly fairy tale fantasies of perfect family life, white family life. You won't see African American, Hispanic, Asian, in any of these early television. That world wasn't there, but they were there. They were the audience. What were they seeing? They weren't seeing themselves. They weren't seeing their stories, but they were seeing the universal family story, the good father, the obedient mother who's always cooking and cleaning, and she wears a dress and a string of pearls. The two obedient children, male, female, and it's good times for everybody. They're living in nice little houses in America with the white picket fence. They've got a car, living in suburbia. That's because suburbia had become the place where most Americans were living. They were moving out of the cities because now most Americans can afford a car. And gas was cheap in those days, folks, 25 cents a gallon. And although they probably complained about the gas prices then too. And so they're driving 5, 6 miles, 10 miles out of town to their house. You can have a lawn, you can have a backyard, you can have a neighborhood that was safe, and it was a good place, supposedly, to raise your children. So most kids of what they call the baby boom, that's what I'm part of, were raised in these places. So was I. There was a place, and we loved it, the neighborhood. We rode our bikes, we played baseball, we played hide and seek until late at night. We didn't want to come home. This is long before computers, folks. Our parents would say, "Go out and play. Don't come home until I call you." And so we were out playing, really seriously playing with the neighborhood kids, and it was a pretty good time. Uh, it's conservative time when it comes to politics. Dwight Eisenhower was the president. We were in a Cold War, and this is the historical context of television, like film in those days, like music, art. We were in a Cold War with Soviet Union. Now it's called Russia, and communism was sweeping. That swept through China, Russia, which is now Soviet Union, and they were not a democracy. And so we were essentially always at differences with these cultures, these democracies. This is long before computers, and so communication and was limited. We didn't know what was going on. We had to send spies to these places. They sent spies here and to report back. There was no cell phone, iPhone, smartphones to take photos or movies of. So being one of these communist countries was dangerous. Could be. So that was the world we're living in as we were put. Hollywood was producing these very innocuous comedy shows that we all loved and grew up with. Besides comedies like I Love Lucy, it was the very first what they call three-camera comedy. It was filmed like a stage play. There's a live audience. They're on a stage, and there's three cameras. One's filming this bunch, one's filming that, and one is going in for close-ups. That was a situation comedies were all filmed that way up until recently, which the sitcoms anyway. With different things now. I won't get to that today. These Netflix mini series, usually filmed with a one camera. Talk about that later. This early days, the music scene, we have Elvis and rock and roll and Chuck Berry, and that was Swiss and rock and roll and Chuck Berry, and that was sweeping the youth market. The kids were digging it. They're reading Jack Kerouac on the road. Beatniks were popular. Artists like Jackson Pollock and Willem Dafoe were thriving. The art scene in America was thriving and families were thriving because there was lots of jobs to have. We're manufacturing things, not like we do now. We don't manufacture a lot. That's all done elsewhere. But the car industry really blew up in the Midwest and Detroit, and it was America was at work. The kids went to school. They came home. The wife was vacuuming, cooking the dinner. The family ate together, hopefully. It's 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then it all gathered. I've listed a couple of them. If you look at chapter television series, commercials. The commercials of the day were automobiles, liquor. It's different. Cigarettes, but people, they're sitting around talking about beer. They're not supposed to anyway. And so people wherever or the kitchen, wherever they were at, they didn't want to be too far away from the screen. It became our parents. I was told I watched too much TV. As a brother said I was. So it was disaster out there, folks, because or the issues weren't getting across the American culture. But watching stars have gun will travel. I can't name all.